Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to another DataStax live stream. I'm Melissa. I'll be your host for today. It's just me today. Usually I have someone here with me, but you have me. So it's going to be fun though. Do not worry. I'm tuning in right now to the chat and I'm seeing where everybody's from. So we have New York. I love New York. I went twice last year for the first time. One of my favorite cities now. Hi from Spain, from London, Nigeria. Wow, we are everywhere today. Philippines. Awesome. Hi, Darwin. I'll be there in a few weeks. I'm going to see my family over there. So that's awesome. More Spain, more Netherlands, Portland. Awesome. Awesome. Welcome, everybody, to today's live stream. It's going to be a fun one. We'll be talking about an app that we built with some fun GenAI tools. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll go ahead and jump into it. All right. All right. Don't want this. Oh, spoke too soon. We have this infinity mirror thing going on. Okay. So I have some slides here, but I also have it on a different screen than my chat. So I'll be going back and forth. So just a heads up for the folks who are in chat, but we have Michelle over here assisting me in the background. So if you have something, I'll go back and forth. But anyway, let's get started. So today's presentation is how to build an AI resume assistant with Astra DB and Langflow. Before we jump into it, just a little bit about me. Again, I'm Melissa. I'm a developer relations engineer here at DataStax, focused on Python. I used to work as a solutions engineer as well, but my main focus now is GenAI and building it and with tools such as Langflow and Astra DB and all of these things here at DataStax. And with that, I also love to consume new tech content around GenAI. So learning about new models and all the capabilities that have come to be in the past 1 year, 2 years now. So it's super fun. I also love a good iced matcha latte. So if you are from the Bay Area and you have places to recommend, please do so. But let's go ahead and get started. Oh, and let's connect. My links are here. So go ahead and stay connected with me. And also join us on Discord. We have a community there that we are building. We have this Discord to talk to you, answer your questions, share your projects that you're working on, announce live streams like this, and keep you in the loop with whatever we are doing here at DataStax. So scan this QR code. It'll bring you directly to the invite link to join our Discord channel, and we'll see you there. So an overview of what we'll be going over today is we'll be defining the problem space that the app that we'll be talking about today solves. We'll be talking about the GenAI tools that we use to build it. Of course, we'll do a demo. But the next two boxes are what I'm most excited about, right? It's diving into Astra DB and vector similarity searches. So with that, we will talk about how to ingest and vectorize data. You see it says job listing, so we'll be talking about more about the data set and what that even is, and how to perform a vector similarity search with Astra DB. And then the fun part is building out the GenAI flow and walking through each step using Langflow. So if you are new and Astra DB and Langflow are new to you, we'll be going into depth through this whole live stream, so do not worry. But if you are returning and these things sound familiar, then awesome. We are using both of those tools today, and that's how we built the fun app that we'll be going over. So I don't have too many slides, but I just wanted to set the ground of what this app really solves. But imagine you're in the job hunt. Maybe some of you are in the job hunt right now as we speak. But there's a lot of things that go into it, right? You're scrolling through job listings. You're tweaking your resume depending on what role you are applying to. And there's the countless automated rejection letters that might come to be. So that might be a recruiter, whether automated or not. They're going through and seeing your resume. They are looking for specific qualifications, keywords, um, requirements that they're looking for that specific role. If your resume does not have it, then it's on to the next. So you, as someone who's applying to a role, for example, if you are going from a support engineer role to a software engineer role, there's some technicalities that you might have to include in your resume to appeal to a software engineer role, right? So there's so many things going on here. And that poses two questions for me. So the first question is there a way to automate this? To automate and automate the process of suggesting improvements and edits to the resume for a given role, right? Iterating through the resume and making those changes and having to think, okay, what qualities does a software engineer have? What qualities does a product manager have? And so on and so forth. And the second question is, well, can I do this with generative AI? So that was where ResumAI came to be pretty much. And as you see here, the tagline is optimize your job search with ResumAI. And again, this app is to help you with the job search process where you give your resume and then you get something back that will basically automate all of that process for you. The tools that we use to build this, again, is DataStax Astra DB. Astra DB is a vector database, so we will be doing vector searches, as I mentioned earlier. We are using Langflow. Langflow is a visual IDE Gen AI app development tool. OpenAI and Streamlit. So OpenAI we used for our models, and Streamlit is where we've deployed the app on. And again, we'll be going over those tools in just a little bit. But before we do that, quick disclaimer. This app is just for demo purposes and obviously not a fully production grade app. So use it and use it lightheartedly. But using the app, you would enter the role that you are looking to apply to. So again, taking my first example, if I'm a support engineer and I want to go into software engineering, I would type in software engineer. And then I would upload my resume. And then I would expect 3 outcomes. So the first outcome is 1, a list of jobs relevant to the current resume that I have. So what does that tell me? That tells me if I have a resume that is more optimized for support engineering, or it has a lot of my support engineering experience, I should expect back a lot of support engineering roles. So that gives me kind of like a level set of what my current resume would appeal to. So the second outcome would be recommendations on how to then improve that current resume. So maybe I need more technical skills on there. Maybe I need certain qualifications. Maybe I should include certain programs that I've used or projects that I've done. So that is outcome number 2. And the last, which is probably the most fun part and the coolest part, in my opinion, is that it actually will give you a draft of the adapted resume. So taking a combination of the outcomes from 1 and 2, and then actually applying that into a draft of a resume for you so that you essentially don't have to do as much work as you would do iterating through the resume yourself. So those 3 outcomes are what we expect out of ResumAI. And again, those 3 outcomes are achieved with vector search and generative AI. So before we actually demo it and see it in action, I wanted to cover a couple of foundational bases. One of those being, what is vector search? So before I actually jump in, I'm going to hop back into the broadcast. How are we doing, everyone? Let's see, we're good on chat. Okay, I just separated my screen, so now I can see the chat over here. But it looks like we're good. Awesome. Thanks for the thumbs up. All right, let's get back into it. Okay, so vector search. Basically what it is, it's a method of finding information by converting data from whether it be text, whether it be images or audio, into mathematical vectors. Now, what is a vector, right? Think back to your 5th grade class or early elementary classes where you learned about XY coordinates. So think of those as a point on a graph. And then when things got a little bit more complicated, you introduced more and more dimensions, 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions. With vectors, in this context, they could have hundreds of dimensions, even thousands of dimensions. And in this context as well, we also call them embeddings. So these vector embeddings, think of it on this diagram right here. Let's take Apple, for example. In a typical database, if I were to look for Apple, it would bring up everything that has that keyword Apple in. So regardless of the context, regardless of whatever else that might have to be related to Apple, it's going to just bring up everything that has Apple in it. So this is a typical keyword search. With vector embeddings, we actually have the ability to capture both semantic relationships and contextual characteristics, among other things, so that instead of just returning back Apple, if I did a vector search, I could then distinguish between if I'm talking about Apple, the company, or Apple, the fruit. So if I'm talking about Apple, the company, then something more similar to Apple, the company, again, in the context of this diagram, would maybe be Google or other big companies rather than banana or orange. So with vectors, we can actually measure how similar they are to each other based on this large array of numbers. And it's a huge advantage over the typical keyword search, as I described earlier. So for unstructured data, this is really great because you don't have to rely on those keywords or structured filters. So this is an example of vector search, and we'll be showing that in just a moment. Yeah, let's see this in Astra DB. Okay, so what you're looking at here is Astra DB. This is our vector database, and we are looking at the collection listings. Let me know if my screen is too small. Do we need it bigger? Comments? Do we need it bigger? I'll zoom in a little bit. Thanks, Jason. Okay. How's that? Too big? Looks better. Okay, awesome. So we are looking at Astra DB, and we're looking at this collection called job listings. So this is basically a data set that I pulled from Kaggle. It's a scraping of a lot of LinkedIn job listings from, I believe, 2023 to 2024. So it's a really, really large data set. You can find it on Kaggle, but I also went and put it on Hugging Face as well so that you can access it with the data sets library. And I went ahead and I put it into this Astra database. And you can see here we have certain columns. So we have the company, we have, sorry, this is a bit hard. There we go. We have the company, we have the description of the role, we have the job title, the location. So these are different things that the data set actually provides to us. And from this, I want to actually see what a vector similarity search looks like. So let's look at the job title column. And you might notice that things are a bit jumbled at the moment. So we have software engineer, we have nurse, fleet car delivery driver, renewal manager. So a bit different roles that we are seeing right now. If I go up into this hybrid search section above and I put software engineer, my hope is that I would see this update to return back roles that are related to software engineering. So let's see if that happens. We'll hit click apply. And if you saw that earlier it was a bit jumbled. It was not in a certain order. And now we have relevant results that are similar to that of a software engineer. So software engineer, software design engineer, founding front-end engineer. And notice how they are not all keyworded software engineer. They could be jobs that are relevant. So founding front-end engineer, the keyword is not software there, but the content or the description of the role might describe it. So again, in the vector search explanation that I just mentioned, it's capturing that contextual aspect of what a software engineer does, as well as what the row captures as well. Let's try something else. Let's also describe the role or describe my qualities. So like as if I'm putting it on a resume. So let's do 10 years of Python experience, graduated with computer science degree. Let's see other tools. Let's say Visual Studio Code. So imagine this is something that you would put on your resume. And I would hope that jobs such as software engineer, backend engineer, things like that would come up based off of what I described with my own qualities and skills. So let's click apply. And as you see here, we return back software engineer, machine learning engineer, full stack developer, Java developer. So even with describing the role and the contents of what would have been on a resume, you also get those job titles back that you are looking for. So that's the idea here. That's what a vector search does. And that's what we are seeing in the back end of what ResumAI does for that first outcome that I described. I'll also take a moment to show you the code in how we actually ingested the data set. So this also might require some zooming in. All right. So this Python script that basically ingests the code, ingests the data set, and then it vectorizes it and puts it into Astra DB. How are we doing that? I am getting my data set from Hugging Face, as I mentioned. I am then creating a pandas data frame here. And then I'm creating a connection with Astra DB. So Astra DB, again, is my vector database. I see questions. I'll get back to that in just a second. I'm creating a collection here called job listings, as we've seen. And then as we go down, you will see this block. And notice that I'm creating this variable called content. And within content, I'm pulling the title. So this refers to the title of the role and the description. So this is the description that we pulled from the job listing. And I'm using both of those two columns as the content that I want to vectorize. In other words, convert into a vector embedding. And when we go down to this update one statement, this essentially just adds the row into Astra DB. You see, I'm giving the title, I'm giving the company name, and then we have this keyword here called vectorize. It's taking that content that we just created above. So what vectorize does, it's a feature within Astra DB, is it allows you to just pass the content that you would like to convert into the vector embedding within that single update statement. So as opposed to having to do an additional API call to say whatever embedding model that you're using, you can do it here basically on the fly within the update statement just by using the $vectorize keyword here. And aside from that, Astra DB is also it's also a Cassandra database at heart. So we also allow metadata filtering. All right, that was a long monologue for me. So let me go into some questions. What was used to scrape LinkedIn? I didn't look into that. Again, I took the data set from Kaggle. So I could follow up in a different as a different resource that Michelle can provide with the follow-up resources, but I don't know the details of that. Sorry about that. Let's see. How much better is vector search than, say, a standard Google search? Okay, so good question. It's different, right? A standard Google search is a search engine. And with Google search, you might notice that they do have this feature now where it generates an AI-generated response. So that's the vector search. So it gathers information from different returned articles or maybe different sentiments that it's grabbed about that specific search query that you've given into Google search. And then it generates a summary that hopes it would answer your question. And I say hopes because a bunch of memes going around where Google kind of hallucinates in these responses and it tells you different information than expected. But that part is the vector search. Google itself is the search engine, but the part where it's gathering all this information and context, and then it's kind of using, and then it uses an LLM to then generate the AI summary. But that's the difference between the two searches, if that makes sense, Deji. Can we load XML data in the vector database collection? Yes, you can. Brian, I hope that answers your question as well. Yes, other data structures are allowed in Astra DB. We handle both unstructured and structured data. Mike, I presume you could switch this model a little. Imagine I was a recruiter and wanted to use this to do my first phase of filtering CVs. Yes, of course. Yeah. So there are different, you can flip this. You can use it for that. I did a view of, me applying for the role, for being the prospect rather than the recruiter. But of course you could flip it. Okay, how are we on time? We're about halfway. So let me jump back into it and we'll get back to some more questions later on. But I think we are going back into slides. Yes. So one quick slide before I go ahead and actually demo ResumAI. We'll be talking about Langflow. I mentioned it earlier. So again, Langflow is a visual IDE for GenAI app development. And it looks like this. Yeah. It's a component based, again, visual. It's very similar to these drag and drop tools that you might use for other tasks. But behind it is all code. And all of this code actually feeds into the back end of what I'm about to show you. So let's bring up the tool, ResumAI. I will show this resume. It's a fake one. Don't worry. I'm not exposing anyone out here, but John Doe is a software engineer. This is his experience. He's been a software engineer at Tech Solutions, a junior software developer at Innovate Tech. He graduated with computer science, and these are his skills. Awesome. But John actually wants to switch career paths, and he wants to go into maybe product. So if I were John, I would go into here. I would do product manager as my desired role. And then I would give my resume. I believe this is the one. Yep. And then, as I mentioned, we are doing 3 things in this process, right? So the 3 outcomes, just to remind you, is to find the similar roles to his current resume, just to level set, say, hey, this is what your role actually would this is what your resume, would actually return back. 2, it will give you suggestions on how to then appeal to the product management role. And then finally, it should give me an adapted resume based off of those recommendations. So as you see here, we get just that. So it gives you an example of some jobs that your current resume would actually apply to. So front-end developer, Java developer, full stack engineer. And then it gives some reasoning behind that as well for your reference. We scroll down a little bit more and we say, here's ways to improve your resume. So highlight management skill, include relevant keywords like product. Of course, when you're going from software into product, there might be some, more technical, less technical, things like that. Here are the recommendations based off of what's currently on your resume. And here's how it would apply more to product management roles. And then it actually gives you back the adapted resume with some edits alongside with it. So let's bring back the original resume and let's compare a little bit for a second. So the experience, notice how in the original one, it's a lot more technical. We developed and maintained web applications. We improved system performance by 25%. Here it starts off with led the development of the web application. So adding a little bit more of the leadership aspect or working with cross-functional teams. And at the bottom, it might add some more product management related skills. And then of course, certifications if you had those. So we achieved the 3 outcomes that we desired that ResumAI should give us, but how did this even happen? So let's think back to the first 2 questions that I asked. Can I do this automatically? And can I do this with generative AI? We saw how we were able to do a vector search to get back these relevant jobs to my current resume, but how do I actually get these suggestions and get a summary of how to improve my current resume? And that's where Langflow comes in. So that picture that you saw on the slide, it's real. It's real. And this is the actual platform that you can use to build out the back end of the whole app that you've just seen. So we'll be going over each of these steps in depth. So first thing that I did, actually, let me stop real quick and pause to look at the chat. Anything here? Oh, here we go. Siva, how can we do scripts with drag and drop for a non-technical person? Great question. I'll be walking over that a little bit here in when I walk through the flow. But basically, Langflow is great for that. If you are non-technical, if you are technical, if you are experienced, if you're more junior, that's what's great about this platform is it has these drag and drop components that are a little bit easier for those who aren't familiar. But for those who are, everything behind each of these components, again, has a functionality. This is not just smoke and mirrors. Each of these things are doing something. This is an actual functional app. So I'll dive into each of these components in just a second. Will you share your codes for this? Yes. Everything is on my GitHub for ResumAI. So Michelle can share the link in just a second, but everything is here. You can build it yourself and try it out for yourself as well. All right. Great. So we are back in Langflow. Okay. So as I was telling, I believe, Siva, each of these are components that have a function behind it. So when you're in Langflow, and what's great about Langflow too is that if you're going from Astra DB, there's a drop down here at the top where you can actually toggle between both of those platforms. Both of those apps, I guess I would say. So from the database to Langflow. And once you're here, you'll see a sidebar with a bunch of components. So you'll see inputs, outputs, models, vector stores, things like that. And each of these drop downs have more beneath them where you can drag and drop. So let's take an example, right? Vector store. I see Astra DB and I want to use it. I can literally bring this over to my playground here and drop it. And then I just input easily the credentials that I'd need to connect to it. So similar to what you saw in the Python code that I demonstrated earlier, you can actually do that in Langflow as well. You can do the ingestion and all of those things because as you see here, we can actually connect to Astra DB with the token, with the credentials that we are looking for. We can bring in the database. So the LiveStream database with my job listings collection. And if you see here, there's actually code that is behind each of these. So Langflow is written in Python. These are all Python code snippets essentially that powers the component itself, but the same way that you would be doing if you were doing this all with code. So that means I can go in and actually customize this myself. So for the more senior developers or more experienced developers, this here is readily available for you as well. And then, and for those who are maybe not as experienced, then you just see the component as it is. And you can go into controls and actually toggle more features that this has to offer. So everything is here visually, and it has the code that is behind it as well. All right. So in the context of ResumAI, remember we are taking the 2 things from the user. That's their job role, which is a text input, and their resume. So in this case, I'm using a chat input or a text input component, and then I'm using an upload, a file upload from the data component here. And those things get sent to a prompt. So in step 3 here, we are using OpenAI to then convert the resume into a markdown format. So this just allows us to read the resume a bit easier. Also in step 2, I skipped this one accidentally, is we parse the resume data. So the resume itself is usually uploaded in PDF. So the step 2 just takes it and puts text. And now that we have it in plain text, it's easier to use and work with. So in step 3, I've asked it to put it into markdown format so that we can achieve the third outcome that we've seen, right? It's seeing it in that adapted format, and then we can edit it and do it a bit easier that way. So note, I am using OpenAI to do that. It just easier for me that way. I did try different Python libraries. I think there was like resume parser or res parser. There are several out there that I tried, but nothing was as pretty as just putting it in markdown format using OpenAI. But that was just a personal decision or choice. All right, and then instead we are doing the vector similarity search against the resume data and the job listings collection in Astra DB. So let's dive into this a bit more. We're connecting with our Astra DB with the token. Again, this is all credentials that you can pull from your Astra database from your dashboard. We saw it in the ingestion code, and then it's the same here. We are giving it the database and the collection that we're pulling from. And then you see that it takes a search input. Now, what's great about Langflow is that all of these components, you can literally connect them with these connector lines right here. And each of these has a specific color associated with it. And if you hover over it, it tells you what is compatible with those inputs. So if I click this, on the left-hand side, you can see what I can then connect to it. So same goes for here, what I'm connecting to. So the parse resume data gives a text output, and Astra DB component is looking for some input or text input or something that it can receive. So if you remember from when I was in Astra DB and I did this vector search, imagine that this is literally the content of your resume. And this is all in this box. And then I'm clicking apply, and then it's going to give me some results here on the bottom. It's the same process that's happening here. I'm going to do another example here. The limit is 100, but let's say I want the top 3 results. I think here I actually mention how many results I want back. Or maybe I don't. Maybe I don't. That's my fault. But here in Astra DB, I can say, okay, limit of 3. So essentially that means give me the top 3 results. And if I click apply and scroll down, then you can see that it limits it to just 3. So that helps with finding the most similar roles that are relevant to your current resume. And then in addition to that, I go ahead and parse the results that I get back from the database. So another cool feature of Langflow is that I can inspect each individual component's output. So how do I do that? I go down to where it says search results. So again, this is the output here. And there's this icon that I can click into. And these are the results that I pulled from the database. So the top 4 in this case. And it's in a little structured format, but then I can use the parse data component to then parse it, put it into plain text, and then feed it into the next step of my process here. So step 1, again, was to get the resume, get the desired role. Step 2 was to then parse the data from the resume into plain text. Step 3 was to then convert it into a more readable format. And step 4, we have performed the vector similarity search to Astra DB. So if we're thinking back to the initial outcomes that I established, this is accomplishing outcome 1. All right, pause for questions. Satish, can somebody share the Discord link? Yes, I will put another QR code at the very end with the Discord link. So please stay till the end and we'll get you added there. Nam, how does Astra DB differ from Langflow and what is the key purpose of both? Great question. So Langflow, okay, Astra DB is the vector database. So the vector database is where your data set or data, wherever you are pulling your data from, whatever source, that's where your data essentially lives. And you store your data there. You can make references and calls to it. But Langflow is steps further from that. Langflow is the actual end-to-end app builder platform. So if you are actually building the app, the database is one part of it. So AstraDB is just one part of it. Langflow takes AstraDB as a component. So it's just one piece. So if I zoom out of this whole end-to-end flow, which is ResumAI, you see this is AstraDB in step 4. That's the time that I reference AstraDB as the vector database. But you need other parts of the application to actually run it, right? You need the input. You need at the end where we use the LLM. I have yet to go through that, but we'll go into it. Where we use the models, where we put the actual where we get the actual output. So AstraDB is the database, and Langflow is the end-to-end application builder, and everything together is the platform. Does that help answer your question, Nam? Harshil said, how to export and add this flow in my app or web platform and make it work for other platform? Great question. So there are many ways to actually use this flow. One of them is going up here to where it says API, and it gives you different ways to connect via API. So we have the curl statement, we have the Python API, Python code. So these are several ways. So the difference between Python API and Python code is that Python code has this function called run flow from JSON. And what that means is I can actually export this flow as a JSON blob. So if I go down from this drop down up top and then I click export, and then save my API keys. Nope. So then I actually export this. It'll save it as resumai.json. And then I can go back into that Python code and then just plug in that JSON, and then it references each individual component. Remember, each component is a block of code. So essentially, it's replicating what I'd be doing if I actually coded this line by line versus me just using this visual aspect component. So it's great for the process of having to iterate between different things. I'll go into that again later when I get to the model piece. On the fly, right? So I can drag and drop multiple components. Let's just say I'm comparing different components and I want to compare different outputs. So I can just move this link into the input of a different output. So let's take this link. Let me zoom in a little bit. And then, put that into a different model, right? Put that into a different model super quickly. Versus if I was doing this with code, which you still can do, I would be getting the documentation from one model, getting the documentation from another model, and then adding that to the code, having to comment stuff out. These are different things that you'd have to go through if you're doing it that way. But with Langflow, it gives you that ease of use. All right. Brian said, can you try running this with multiple LLM providers, say Anthropic, hypothetically with the locally run smaller model? Yeah, Brian, you can. So in that example that I just showed where I'm iterating between different models, you definitely can. For the hypothetical with running a local small model, yes, Langflow is open source. So you can go on GitHub, you can download this locally, install it locally, and then run it locally, and then you can then use the smaller hosted models. Awesome. Jason said, Same question as someone else. Can you send it the link to a job listing / job description? That's what I've been doing with ChatGPT. Yeah, great question. I don't in this process where I give it the resume and the desired role, that's not technically built in, but I'm sure if I were to, build on this more, then there could be another feature or section where it says enter your resume and then enter a job listing, and then it'll pretty much do the same thing, right? It'll give me recommendations based on that specific job listing and compare it to the qualifications on my resume, and then give me output based on those two things. But in this process, in this current state, it's not doing that yet, but definitely achievable. All right. So I just really want to highlight how simple this was to drag and drop components to build out what's happening in the background of ResumAI, right? So as we get to step 6, we are actually building out the 3 outcomes that I mentioned in the beginning. So think of it like I've had an idea of what I wanted to see as the result of ResumAI, and then now I'm putting it into essentially a prompt that is telling a model, hey, I want to do this, and I want to see this outcome at the end. And I'm able to do that and iterate through that really quickly using Langflow. So I can go into this prompt, and it's a pretty hefty, but I'm essentially saying you're a personal job resume, personal job finder and resume assistant. This is what I'm doing. And these are my variables. So in this prompt, I have several variables that are in curly brackets. And what that does is that creates a prompt variable. So on the bottom, you see them pop up. So if I were to create a new one, it would say like test. And you see that pop up on the bottom here. So you can do that throughout your prompt and actually connect different components or outputs from components to that specific variable to feed into the prompt. And that's essentially what I did here. So if I zoom out again, apologize for my zooming in and out, everyone. I know it gets dizzy watching this, so my apologies. Okay, so I had 3 variables in that prompt. One was job matches, one was job role, and one was resume. So the job matches is an output from my Astra DB vector search. So I linked the search results from Astra DB to the parse data component to the job matches variable. So you see how I was easily able to do that. And then, what happened there? And then job role is essentially the role that the user is giving in the beginning of the flow. So if I go back all the way to the beginning, we asked for the job role as input, and this takes all the way to job role, just like that. And then we are getting the resume data. So remember when we converted the resume to markdown format, we are taking that all the way from here as an output and putting it into the resume variable for the prompt. So all of those things get put together into that single prompt, and we are then giving it to OpenAI, and OpenAI reads the prompt. OpenAI, we're using it as a model. We're using GPT-4o. But again, as I demonstrated earlier, you don't have to use OpenAI. You can use Bedrock. You can use Google. You can use several other models that you'd prefer. You can do a local one, like I mentioned, if you were to run Langflow locally. This is DataStax Langflow, so this is hosted in DataStax. But this is the amazing thing, is that Langflow gives you the power to be so flexible with your generative AI application development process. So then I give it to OpenAI, and then I get some output. So if I inspect this, this is the actual result that I see in the interface of ResumAI at the end. And then we return it to the user. So you can see I was able to build ResumAI from start to finish pretty much of course, with the help of Astra DB and ingesting the job listings from start to finish and bringing in all of those Gen AI components all within Langflow. And what's great is after you build it, you can test it in the playground feature here. So if I actually put in, if I actually put in software engineer and then send that, you can see that the flow is running, it's thinking, and it should give me a response similar to what I saw in the ResumAI UI itself. So here's the example. How well will your resume do based on being a designer? This is where I actually gave a designer role. It's saying you're actually more qualified for a front-end developer based on your resume now. So here's how you can improve it to be more relevant to a designer role. So same thing as we've seen earlier. All right. Apologies for that. I was just telling Michelle that I had a really crazy windstorm last night that took out my power, and I was worried that it was going to happen again today. And lo and behold, I jinxed myself. I should have knocked on wood. But we are back. We only have a few minutes together, so I wanted to just wrap up. Yeah, can everyone hear me? Just give me a thumbs up if you're still in. I hope you're still in. Thank you, Bobbin. Okay, great. So I'll take these last few minutes to just wrap up everything that we showed today. Thanks for sticking with me, everyone. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we talked about Langflow. I think that was the last thing that we left off on. We showed the end-to-end flow. So I just wanted to leave off with just this overall diagram when I was kind of thinking about ResumAI and what is essentially happening. If we zoom out of Langflow and each of those individual components, what's really going on? So we're taking the input, the resume, which is a PDF, the desired job role, which is the text, and there's kind of like two flows that eventually converge into one. And it's getting the job listings for the vector search. So the vector search aspect that I was explaining earlier, and then bringing it all together, all of the results into prompt, which is then put into the LLM. In this case, it's OpenAI. And then it's returning those three inputs. So essentially the job listings do go into the LLM as well, but I did it like this to show the three individual outputs and how each of those fed into the final response that we see in the ResumAI UI. And as for Streamlit goes, this is where everything is, sorry, my slides are going crazy. As for Streamlit goes, this is where everything is being hosted on. If I had the time back, I would have walked you through how I did that within the code, but everything is on the GitHub. So please visit that and make some comments there as well if you have them. All right, so let's do a quick summary to wrap up everything. So we did today was introduce ResumAI and the problem that it solves. Talked about vector search, just what it is, a refresher for those who are not familiar, or for those who have heard about Astra DB and who have come to our live streams, and just an overview for those who might not be familiar with ResumAI. With vector search, we demoed ResumAI, we showed what it does and the actual back end, and then we walked through the GenAI flow and how we built that in Langflow. And that pretty much wraps it up. I know this was not the storybook ending that I wanted. I would love to get that time back to spend more time in the code and show you how I did it in Streamlit. But luckily, everything is on GitHub. So here are those two resources to go ahead and try it out. So you can deploy GitHub, you can deploy Resume from the GitHub, and you can try it out on Langflow yourself. And I did see a question there where it said, why didn't I include the JSON in the GitHub? I can really do that. I can update the GitHub today to make sure that's all ready for you to deploy. But it also poses a challenge for you. Can you replicate the flow that I did in Langflow yourself and do it step by step, as I mentioned. I have a blog post that also encapsulates the step by step process of how to build out the app if the GitHub itself might be a little bit challenging. So go over to the blog post and check out the step by step process to help you with that until then. And I forgot who asked, but we do have the Discord again here for those who would like to join. So again, scan this. It'll bring you to the invite link, and you will then be a part of our DataStax Discord community. So you'll be connected with myself along with other DevRel engineers that are on my team, and other amazing people here at DataStax to help answer your questions. And again, it's not just for questions, but sharing with DataStax, Astra DB, and Langflow, talk about GenAI, talk about other tech, and many, many more. It was great hanging out with y'all for this past hour. Stay connected with here at DataStax. Stay connected with myself, and we will catch you in the next one. Thank you again for tuning in. Bye.